My family missed my graduation, and when I finally brought it up, they casually remarked, "We didn't think you'd care that much about the ceremony." I chuckled softly, but deep down, I felt a pang of disappointment. A day later, I found myself on a secluded beach, drink in hand, the sun setting behind me, and I snapped a photo that captured my mixed emotions perfectly. I captioned it simply, "Turns out I do care." Without any fanfare, I dropped it into the family group chat. Within moments, my phone buzzed incessantly, but let me take a step back. My graduation took place on a Saturday this past spring, and it wasn't just any degree, it was a master's in environmental science. I had poured 3 grueling years into this achievement while juggling a full-time job, attending night classes, and squeezing in weekend study sessions. I had written research papers at 3 a.m., and the thesis alone had nearly broken me 300 pages on sustainable coastal development that my advisor deemed genuinely groundbreaking. Those words meant everything to me. I never complained to my family about the struggle. When my mom asked why I had been absent from Sunday dinners, I explained about the night classes. She nodded, made a comment about me always having my head in the clouds, and swiftly changed the subject to my sister's latest home renovation project. When my dad questioned the need for more schooling after I already had a perfectly good bachelor's degree, I tried to convey my passion for the research and the doors it could open. He shrugged and said, "Well, as long as you're paying for it yourself," before turning back to the game. I told myself their lack of enthusiasm was fine, not everyone gets excited about academic achievements. I understood that. I wasn't expecting a parade or an elaborate celebration, I'm not that kind of person. But I thought they would want to be there, maybe take a few photos, perhaps grab dinner afterward. I had sent out the invitation 6 weeks earlier, complete with a handwritten note explaining how much it would mean to have them there. I followed up twice, but all I got from my mom was, "We'll try to make it." My sister, Lindsay, said that weekend was tough with Ella's soccer schedule, and my dad never responded directly, he just asked if I was still doing that school thing when we spoke on the phone about fixing his computer. I convinced myself it was enough that they knew about it and would make an effort. Surely, they understood this wasn't just some routine event but the culmination of years of sacrifice. The morning of graduation, I woke up early, unable to sleep. There was a nervousness I hadn't anticipated, not about the ceremony itself, but about finally celebrating this milestone with my family. Would they be proud? Would they finally understand why this mattered so much to me? I checked my phone repeatedly, expecting a message to come through any second, "On our way," or "See you soon," or even just "Good luck today." But there was nothing. I showered, shaved, and carefully put on the new shirt I had bought specifically for the occasion. It was a gift from my grandfather before he passed away, the one family member who had always believed in my academic pursuits. As I adjusted my tie in the mirror, I found myself talking to him. "Wish you were here for this one, Gramps." The tie was a deep green with tiny silver patterns, the color of growth, as he had said when he gave it to me after my high school graduation. By noon, as I donned my cap and gown, I still hadn't heard from my family. I thought maybe they were driving in and hadn't texted, or perhaps they were planning to surprise me. I drove to campus alone, parked in the crowded lot, and joined the stream of black-robed graduates making their way toward the auditorium. All around me, families were gathering, parents straightening their children's hoods, siblings teasing each other about tripping on stage, grandparents dabbing proud tears. I kept my phone in hand, waiting for it to buzz with news of their arrival. The ceremony began at 2 p.m. I filed in with my department, took my assigned seat, and scanned the audience as the procession continued. The auditorium was vast, packed with faces. I searched for familiar ones among the sea of proud families, my row, my section, the balcony, nothing. The university president spoke about achievement and perseverance, and the commencement speaker, a renowned scientist whose work I had studied and admired, talked about using knowledge to change the world. I should have been soaking in every word, but instead, I kept glancing back at the entrance doors, wondering if they had slipped in late. Then they called my name, Daniel James Wright, Master of Science in Environmental Studies, with distinction. I forced a smile as I crossed the stage, my name echoing through the speakers to applause from strangers whose relatives' excuses followed by a genuine "I'm so sorry." Instead, Lindsay replied, "We didn't think you'd care that much about the ceremony." Those 7 words landed like a punch to the gut. I stared at the screen for a while, rereading it as if I might misinterpret the tone. But no, that sentence did more damage than a full day of silence. 3 years of my life, filled with late nights, early mornings, missed family gatherings, and postponed vacations, had been reduced to an assumption that I wouldn't care about this moment. I didn't reply, not then, not with words. I smiled quietly, set my phone down, and opened a browser. There was a trip I had talked about for years, a place I had always dreamed of visiting, Costa Rica. The combination of rainforests and beaches, the sense that it was a whole world away where conservation and science were valued, had always called to me. Every time I brought it up, someone in my family would scoff, saying, "That's a lot of money for sand and water. Wouldn't you rather go somewhere practical? You can't do that kind of trip alone, it's depressing." But suddenly, I wanted exactly that. I didn't need company, I didn't need permission. I needed a reset to remember who I was and what I valued before years of family indifference had made me question it. So, I booked the ticket, paid in full, no points, no discounts, just peace. First class, even. A graduation gift to myself. Then I packed my bags and made sure work was squared away with a hastily requested leave of absence. My boss, who had attended my graduation with his wife, was surprisingly understanding and slipped out the door. No one knew. I didn't leave a note, didn't post anything, just boarded the plane and disappeared. And that's where the story begins, not at graduation, not with the silence, but with the moment I chose to stop asking to be seen. The airport buzzed with the usual chaos, overhead announcements, the rush of people weaving through security. But for me, every sound became a gentle reminder of leaving it all behind. I checked my single suitcase, moved through TSA pre-check with practiced efficiency, and found my gate with time to spare. I remember sitting there, watching families corralling excited children, couples leaning into each other, friends checking last-minute details, and feeling, for the first time, like the silence around me was a choice. I realized that every congratulatory text, every "we're proud of you" I had waited for would never come. It was liberating in its own way. As I boarded the plane, I settled into my window seat, watching the familiar cityscape shrink beneath me. I wasn't sad, not really. I felt a quiet thrill at the thought of solitude, the freedom to just be without the weight of family expectations. For as long as I could remember, I had been the reliable one, the one who fixed things, who showed up, who listened to everyone's problems and never complained about his own. The flight was long enough for me to sink into reverie. I pulled out my graduation program, running my fingers over the embossed lettering of my name, the specialty I had chosen, the honors notation. All those nights of exhaustion and doubt, all for this moment that should have been shared but wasn't. With every mile, those pages seemed to whisper promises of a new beginning. I ordered a glass of champagne, my first real celebration, and watched the clouds drift by beneath us. A woman across the aisle noticed the program in my hand and offered a genuine congratulations. We talked briefly about my field of study and her own work in marine biology years ago. "It's important work," she said before putting her headphones back on. "The world needs more people who care about what happens to it." The simple validation from a stranger made my throat tight. Hours later, the plane descended over a coastline that looked almost surreal, verdant rainforests meeting golden beaches, a deep blue ocean stretching endlessly. I stepped off into a gentle warmth that immediately washed over me, melting the remnants of that cold, biting disappointment from home. I felt an odd calm here, the world was vast and indifferent, and I was free to define my own worth. My first night was spent in a modest bungalow perched on a hillside overlooking the sea. I sat on the small porch, a cool cocktail in hand, and listened to the rhythmic lap of waves, a soothing metronome that replaced the discord of silence I had endured back home. Every sound, every breath of wind seemed to validate my choice. The tiny geckos skittering across the ceiling, the distant calls of howler monkeys from the jungle behind me, the rustling palms, they felt more present, more real than the hollow congratulations I might have received out of obligation. I wasn't running away, I was moving towards something real, a life that wouldn't jokes where they'd once posted 17 messages about my niece's lost tooth. Silence. I lifted my phone and framed the shot, the beach behind me, drink in hand, my feet barely in view. But it was my expression that mattered most, a half smile, not smug but calm, as if I had stumbled into something sacred. In the background, you could just make out the edge of my thesis printout, serving as a makeshift coaster for my drink, a small private joke to myself. Click. I tapped the screen, no message, just the photo, and then beneath it, I typed, "Turns out I do care." Send. Then I turned my phone off. I didn't wait for the reaction, didn't wonder how they'd interpret it. I just slid the phone into my bag, closed my eyes, and let the sun warm my face. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be chosen, I had chosen myself. It started with a buzz, then another. I didn't turn my phone on right away, I let it sit there, muted and vibrating deep in the canvas of my beach bag, like a panicked heartbeat trying to be heard. It wasn't until the sun began its slow descent behind the horizon, casting the water in copper and blood orange hues, that I picked it up again. 37 missed notifications. The group chat was alive again after a full day of radio silence. The first message came from my mom. "Wait, where are you?" Then Lindsay, "Was that real? Are you actually gone?" Then the others started pouring in. Dad, who rarely texted, chimed in, "You could have told someone you were leaving," which was rich coming from a man who didn't even remember to show up for the culmination of my 3-year academic journey. My younger cousin even added, "Dang, that's a power move." He always liked drama, even if he didn't understand it. But most of the messages weren't curious, they were defensive, confused, panicked, like they had all suddenly realized something was missing from their carefully arranged little orbit, and that thing was me. Lindsay sent 3 voice notes in a row, none of which I played. The preview text alone told me what I needed to know. "Okay, I didn't mean it like that. We just thought you never made a big deal of ceremonies. I was having a rough day too, you know? Ella was upset about losing, and I had to deal with that." There it was, the slow pivot from indifference to justification to guilt. My mom started texting separately from the group chat, "Daniel, please don't be dramatic. We didn't realize it was so important to you. You've always been so independent." Even my uncle, who rarely engaged with family matters, messaged, "Everyone's worried. Just let them know you're safe." And the thing is, I wasn't angry anymore, not really. Not in the way I used to be, back when I still hoped they'd wake up one day and just see me. What I felt now was something colder, cleaner, done. Not dramatic, not explosive, just done. They didn't even realize how long I'd been fading out of the family photo, background by louder voices and shinier stories. How many years I'd been handing over parts of myself, time, energy, care, and getting crumbs in return. How often I'd laughed off being overlooked just to keep the peace, like the time I published my first academic paper, sent them all copies, and not one of them mentioned reading it. Or when I received a small grant for my research and called to share the news, only to have the conversation redirected to Lindsay's kitchen renovation within minutes. But that one sentence, "We didn't think you'd care that much about the ceremony," had cracked it wide open. Now they were scrambling, desperate to rewind something that had been unraveling for years. But I wasn't interested in rewinding, I was already somewhere else, somewhere warmer, quieter, mine. The island had a rhythm of its own. By the second morning, I woke not to an alarm, not to the drone of emails or half-hearted family group messages, but to the sound of waves breathing in and out like a heartbeat older than time. I moved slower, chewed longer, noticed things, the shape of clouds, the way sunlight filtered through palm fronds, the laughter of strangers who didn't know my name and didn't need to. I signed up for a guided hike through the nearby rainforest preserve. Our guide, a local man named Carlos with encyclopedic knowledge of the ecosystem, lit up when I mentioned my degree in environmental science. "Then you must come see our conservation project," he exclaimed. He adjusted the tour on the spot, showing me areas where reforestation efforts were succeeding, explaining challenges with local water systems. For hours, I was just about creating systems where human needs and environmental health aren't in constant opposition. I found myself talking more than I had in months, ideas flowing freely. She listened with genuine interest, asked insightful questions, and challenged my assumptions in ways that made me think deeper rather than defend myself. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across our table, she said something that stayed with me. "You know what I like about scientists? They notice things other people miss. They pay attention. That's a rare gift." In that moment, I thought, this is the life I want, not the one where I keep trying to prove I deserve space in other people's plans, but the one where I build something from stillness, from peace, from the startlingly beautiful quiet of being enough on my own. That night, I watched the moon drag its silver trail across the water, like it had somewhere to be and wasn't in a rush. I sat alone, no music, no phone, just the sound of insects and the slow churn of the tide. I realized something: I'd never been lonely here, not once. This was strange because for years, I thought solitude was the thing I feared most. I had filled every corner of my life with people, family, friends, coworkers, always trying to be useful, likable, agreeable. Always available, always saying yes. I thought staying connected meant staying safe, that being forgotten was the worst thing that could happen. But the truth was, the worst thing wasn't being forgotten, it was remembering, in those quiet, aching moments, just how little space I ever really took up in the places I thought were mine. I used to believe love meant patience, that if I kept showing up, kept giving, kept shrinking myself to fit their world, eventually someone would notice. Someone would say, "Hey, we see you. We're grateful. You matter." But they didn't. And now that I was gone, they did what they always did: they reacted, not because they missed me, but because they missed the version of me who made everything easier for them. They missed the available me, the quietly dependable me, the one who didn't ask for much and took whatever scraps of affection were thrown his way. But that version of me stayed home. The man on this island, the one with sand between his toes and a spine that finally straightened under the weight of no one else's expectations, he was something different. He was done performing, done waiting, done belonging to people who only noticed his absence, never his presence. When I finally turned my phone back on, 3 days since I'd sent that photo, the screen lit up like a slot machine. Over 100 missed notifications, voicemails stacked on top of each other, missed calls from numbers I recognized by heart and a few I didn't. The group chat was unrecognizable now. Where there used to be one-liners and lazy memes, there were long, frantic messages, one after another. "Mom, please call me. I didn't realize how hurt you were. We can plan a small celebration when you're back. Your father feels terrible. Dad, you could have just talked to us instead of disappearing. This isn't like you, Daniel. Lindsay, I didn't mean it that way, I swear. We can plan something for when you're back, a proper graduation dinner with everyone. Uncle Joe, your mom's really upset. Can you just text her? Lindsay again, seriously, ignoring us now? This is childish." Then not long after, "Okay, I'm sorry. I was out of line. Please just let us know you're safe." Guilt, anger, pleading, back to guilt. They cycled through every emotion but the one that might have mattered most, understanding. They weren't sorry for what they did, they were sorry that I finally reacted to it. Yet I read every word. It would have been a lie to say I didn't feel something. A small part of me, the same part that used to stay up late remembering moments where I'd wait for them to notice the extra effort I made, the help I offered, the achievement I earned, still wanted to fix things. Still wanted someone to step up and say, "We were wrong." But none of them did. They just wanted it to blow over, wanted me to come back, resume my role, let the silence return to its familiar, comfortable place. So I gave them a silence that was louder. I muted the group chat. One by one, I tapped the names, selected, blocked, and felt a strange sense of peace every time the confirmation popped up. There was no satisfaction, just clarity. This wasn't about punishing anyone, it was about freeing myself from the echo chamber of being tolerated. Then finally, I opened my contacts list and stared at the number I had since I was 16. Something in me refused to go back. The thought of returning to the same familiar spaces, the same polite indifference, the same slow erosion of self felt heavier than any suitcase I had packed. So, I walked down to the front desk of the little beach resort and asked, "Any chance I could extend my stay?" The woman smiled, typing quickly. "How long are we thinking?" I hesitated, then said, "Let's start with 2 more weeks." 2 weeks turned into 4, and somewhere between hiking jungle trails and sipping morning coffee on balconies carved into cliffsides, something shifted. I stopped counting the days, I stopped checking the calendar entirely. I started making small, quiet plans, not for return flights or apologies, but for living. I reconnected with Carlos from the nature preserve. He introduced me to Dr. Navarro at the local university, who happened to be looking for someone with a fresh master's degree to help develop a community education program focused on sustainable coastal management. "Your thesis focus is exactly what we need," she said after reading my work. "Someone who understands both the science and the human elements. A quiet woman named Elena, who worked with the university's outreach program, offered me a place to stay in her family's guest house if I committed to the project. Nothing formal yet, just space, time, a bed, and a chance to use my degree for something that mattered. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt real. I found I liked the rhythm of slow, deliberate days, planning curricula that would actually help people, walking to town barefoot, fixing things with my hands. No expectations, no trying to be what someone else needed. For the first time, I had room to ask myself what I needed. Some days, the old doubts crept in: was I being selfish? Was I running? But every time I walked through the village and someone greeted me by name, or watched local fishermen implementing sustainable practices I'd helped explain, or sat by the sea with a book and no interruptions, I knew the answer: no, I wasn't running, I was finally arriving. It was a Tuesday when it hit me. I was organizing some books for the community program, the sun soft and low over the trees, when I caught my reflection in a dusty windowpane. I stopped. It was such a simple thing: my own face, older than I remembered, tan from weeks in the sun, the crease between my brows finally softening. I barely recognized myself, not because I looked different, but because for the first time, I looked at peace. There was no audience here, no role to perform, no sibling to outshine or parent to appease, just me, finally using my education for something that mattered, on the edge of a new life. And I thought, this is who I've always been beneath the noise. It wasn't a grand epiphany, no lightning bolt, just a quiet knowing. The version of me they forgot on my graduation, the one they assumed wouldn't care, was gone. In his place stood someone sturdier, softer too, not in a fragile way, but in that solid, unshakable way that comes from no longer needing permission to take up space. I hadn't spoken to my family in over a month now. I didn't miss them, not because I hated them, but because I finally understood the kind of love I had been chasing didn't exist in that house. I had spent so many years bending myself into versions of the son, the brother, the dependable one they'd accept. And they still didn't, not because I wasn't enough, but because they never looked closely enough to see what was in front of them. Sometimes, people only value what they lose when it's too far gone to reach, and by then, it's not their right to have it back. I wiped my hands on my shorts and looked around the books, the porch, the hammock swinging gently in the breeze, and thought, I want to stay. Not just for another few weeks, but for good. I never told them I wasn't coming back. I didn't need to. The silence they used to give me, I gave it back. But this time, it had weight, purpose. It wasn't empty, it was full of peace. I changed my number, closed my old accounts, and started building a life using the very degree they couldn't be bothered to celebrate. In a beautiful twist of irony, the research I was now developing would likely be published in journals my father might someday read without ever knowing his son wrote the words. The sea is always just a few steps away. I wake up with the sun, fall asleep without worry. Some days are hard, research always is. Some days are beautiful, teaching local children about their ecosystem and watching their eyes light up with understanding. I didn't need a grand finale or some emotional confrontation, just stillness, freedom.